The auditorium was packed, the kind of crowded that made the air feel heavier with every breath. Students fanned themselves with notebooks, phones buzzed under desks, and the hum of chatter echoed off the walls. It wasn't just another assembly, this was Future Leaders Week, the big event the school had been preparing for months. Banners hung above the stage, the words, "Your future, your story," painted in bold letters. Teachers wore their best suits and dresses, parents had been invited, and the principal had reminded everyone at least a dozen times that today's guest speaker was someone who would inspire the leaders of tomorrow. The hype had been building since the name was first announced, the daughter of a self-made CEO millionaire. At just 18, she was already a minor celebrity in her own right, appearing on magazine covers, attending charity galas, and constantly followed by whispers of privilege and promise. Some students were skeptical, others curious, but most were excited to see someone so close to their age who had the kind of life they only saw on TV. The principal took the stage with a grin so wide it looked rehearsed. He spoke of hard work, ambition, and the power of role models. Then, with a flourish, he called her name. Applause erupted, feet stomped, and heads turned toward the side of the stage. But the girl didn't move. She stood there in the wings, just barely visible, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. The stage lights caught the gleam of her designer shoes, her flawless hair, but her expression was unreadable, something between defiance and fear. The clapping slowed, confusion spreading through the audience. The principal, still smiling, extended a hand toward her, but she shook her head, almost imperceptibly. The silence grew louder. She whispered something to the event coordinator beside her, who tried nudging her forward, but she stayed rooted in place. Her lips moved again, and though no microphone caught the words, everyone near enough could see what she said, "I'm not doing it." Gasps fluttered through the front rows. Students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, muttering to one another. "Is she serious? What's wrong with her? She doesn't even care." Some rolled their eyes, others smirked, treating it like entertainment. Teachers, however, felt their stomachs twist. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was a disaster. The school's prized event was unraveling in real time, and the guest of honor was refusing to play her part. The principal tried to save face, clearing his throat and thanking her for attending, his voice brittle at the edges. He gestured back toward her, urging her again, but she simply turned her head away. That was it, the opportunity everyone had been waiting for. Students, parents, staff, died before it even began. Near the back row, Mr. Daniels watched it unfold with a mixture of frustration and something deeper, hurt. He wasn't just any teacher in that auditorium. He was the one who had stayed late with kids who didn't have Wi-Fi at home. The one who spent his own money on binders and pencils when budgets ran out. The one who knew firsthand how desperately these students needed hope, because he was still clawing for it himself. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment barely held together by peeling paint and drafty windows. His car coughed black smoke every morning, and the stack of overdue bills on his kitchen counter grew taller each month. There were days he skipped breakfast and pretended he wasn't hungry just to make sure his students never saw him weak. He had dreamed that today might spark something in them, something bigger than what their small town told them they could be. But now, watching the millionaire's daughter walk off the stage, eyes lowered as though she didn't owe anyone a word, he felt a fire kindling inside him. It wasn't anger at her alone, it was at the injustice of it. These kids deserved better than silence. They deserved a story that made them believe in their own. The auditorium buzzed louder now, students whispering, teachers fidgeting. Some parents shook their heads, muttering about wasted time. The principal stammered through his notes, but his words fell flat. The energy of the room was gone, replaced with disappointment that clung to every corner. And then Mr. Daniels did something even he hadn't expected. He pushed back his chair and stood. His heart thudded in his chest, but his feet moved forward before his mind could talk him out of it. The sound of his shoes against the floor caught attention, row by row, until the entire room watched him stride toward the stage. The principal blinked, startled, as Daniels climbed the steps. "If she won't speak," Daniels said, his voice carrying clear and steady, "then I will." The room froze. Students leaned forward, teachers gasped, the principal's jaw slackened. Even the millionaire's daughter, seated now in the front row with her arms folded, tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as though seeing him for the first time. Daniels gripped the microphone, his palms damp, but his resolve firm. He looked out at the sea of faces, his students, his kids, and felt something settle inside him. He wasn't a millionaire's heir. He wasn't famous. But he had something more important. A story that mattered. At first, Mr. Daniel's words came out haltingly, as though he wasn't sure the microphone truly belonged to him. But once he started, it was like a dam breaking. He confessed that he had nearly dropped out of school when he was their age. That back then, no one thought much of him. He wasn't the star athlete, not the straight-A student, not the kid with family connections. He was just the boy with a worn backpack, the one who quietly disappeared after class to stock shelves at the grocery store until midnight. He told them how college had seemed like an impossible dream, not because he didn't want it, but because there wasn't money. Nights spent studying on an empty stomach, rejection letters piling on his desk, those had been his reality. I didn't think I was smart enough, he admitted. And I didn't think anyone would care if I made it or not. The room grew stiller with every word. Students who had been slouching now sat upright. A boy in the back, known for sleeping through assemblies, leaned forward on his desk. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sugar-coated, it was raw truth. Daniel spoke about his students too, never naming names, but painting pictures everyone recognized. He talked about the kid who worked nights at the gas station, so tired in class that his eyes fought to stay open, but whose mind was sharper than anyone gave him credit for. He mentioned the girl who wrote poems in the margins of her math notebook, words so powerful they could bring a reader to tears, though she was too afraid to share them. He spoke of the shy ones, the loud ones, the ones who thought they didn't matter. You think your story doesn't matter until one day, someone else needs to hear it, Daniel said, his voice stronger now, his hand tightening on the mic. You don't have to be rich, or famous, or perfect. You just have to keep showing up. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The atmosphere shifted. Phones lowered into laps, the restless murmurs faded. A kind of collective breath filled the room. For many of those kids, it was the first time an adult had spoken to them with such honesty, without the polished surface of cliches or empty pep talks. He wasn't telling them they could be anything if they just believed. He was telling them that life was hard, unfair, and messy, but that they had the strength to keep going anyway. And then, quietly at first, someone stood. It was the CEO's daughter. She had been sitting in the front row, arms folded, head down, until something in Daniel's words seemed to break through her defenses. Her face was different now, not cold, not distant, but open, conflicted. The students followed her with their eyes as she rose to her feet and walked toward the stage. The crowd held its breath. Daniels looked at her, then stepped aside, offering the microphone. She hesitated only a second before taking it. I didn't want to speak today, she began, her voice shaking, vulnerable in a way no one expected. Because I thought I had nothing worth saying. My dad is the millionaire, not me. Everything I have, every opportunity, it was handed to me. And I thought you would hate me for it. I thought you'd think I couldn't possibly understand. The student stared, transfixed. For the first time, she wasn't the heir to an empire, or a headline on a glossy magazine. She was just a girl standing on stage, stripped of the armor privilege had given her. But hearing Mr. Daniels, she continued, glancing at him with gratitude in her eyes, made me realize that maybe my story isn't about what I've earned yet, but about the weight I carry. The expectations, the constant feeling that I'll never live up to my father, that everyone's already decided who I'm supposed to be. Sometimes, that makes me want to give up before I even begin. Gasps rippled through the room. Students who had once rolled their eyes now nodded, suddenly understanding. Struggle wore many faces, some wore hand-me-downs, others wore designer jackets. But pain was still pain, doubt was still doubt. She took a deep breath, and her voice grew steadier. So maybe what I can tell you is this: don't run away from your story. Don't hide from it, because whether it's about fighting for food on the table, or fighting to prove you're more than your last name, your story matters. And one day, it will matter to someone else who needs to hear it. The room exploded, not with whispers this time, but with applause. Thunderous, rising from every corner of the auditorium. Students clapped, some even cheered. Teachers wiped their eyes discreetly, and the principal, though still stunned, joined in. Daniels and the girl shared a glance. In that look was something unspoken: respect, gratitude, and the recognition that both of them had given the other courage. He had given her the push to find her voice. She had given him proof that even the most unlikely moments could change lives. When the assembly finally ended, Students spilled out into the hallways buzzing, not about silence or scandal, but about hope. They carried with them not just the words of a millionaire's daughter, but the raw truth of a teacher who had stood up when no one else dared. That day, something shifted. The daughter who refused to speak had found her voice, and the struggling teacher who thought he had nothing left to give had sparked a fire in hundreds of young hearts. And together, in that one unplanned moment, they showed an entire school that stories, no matter how broken, heavy, or imperfect, could light the path forward.